some of the things that she really brings up, of course, is the struggles for housing. I think was one that was really significant, prevalent. You can see that. And then health. Right. So what are some of the challenges that Puerto Ricans have faced in the United States around these issues of healthcare and housing? Quality of life, I guess that would end up being. But
they were highly discriminated against, not just for renting purposes, but even to purchase homes. And I found, I already knew this, I guess, because of my own experiences, but it's like eye-opening, I guess, or a reminder how Puerto Ricans were discriminated against, but it said that Hispanics tend to be like that middle ground between Anglo-Saxons and African Americans, but that Puerto Ricans they seem to be more towards the African American, whereas Cubans and Mexicans would be more in the center. And it's referring to the 80s and the 90s, which is exactly when I was a teenager and I was seeing all this, but through a teenager's eyes. So it was interesting to just read it as an adult, it wasn't just my community, this was pretty much like the big picture.
Mm-hmm. I thought that quote was interesting too. Did anyone else want to comment on that quote before I say anything?
I never lived in California. The little bit I've been there, I actually always feel that the Latino people are more shunned and discriminated, but it's just an impression.
More
maybe
so
wrong. Than here,
than
the
here.
Latin, yes.
Okay.
It seems that truly they're all gardeners and babysitters. I can see people in any other walk of life, but I must stress it might be amniotic. After all, I live here, so of course I know more people. And I must say that the most successful artists are Puerto Rican, so for me, it's a personal experience, but if I think 15 years ago, the only ones who had their house were my friends Puerto Ricans, also dancer, choreographer, visual artist. The only person I know who got the Genius Award is my Puerto Rican friend. So I have to either think, are they such exceptions, which they never made me feel they were, and through them I met a large group of Puerto Rican artists and intellectuals. Or is it that things are slightly better now than they were when she was doing research, especially thinking when the Bronx, the decay, the slum landlords, all of that, but that you would go, you, and apply for an apartment, to a bank and be turned down simply because you're from Puerto Rico, knowing them who now have a beautiful house. Went from an apartment to having a house. I think it was always just a social thing more.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have the money and the job or you don't?
Mm-hmm.
And,
Any other thoughts?
I was reading this, I thought it was outdated.
Mm-hmm.
I could tell it was old because she mentioned Hunts Point, and I've been working in that area for 4 years, and it's changed a lot. There's a lot more buildings, a lot of more commercial areas are growing. So it's really changing from what she talks about.
Okay, great. And this was published in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's already 9 years old, we can assume that if it came out in 2000, she must have finished doing her research a couple of years before that.
yeah,
It's
the
gonna take a
dates
couple
she
years.
mentions are in the 80s and 90s.
Well, it would have to be 80s and 90s,
yeah.
right? Because they came out in 2000. So that might be part of, okay.
In health, my experience, when my son was born, I was on welfare, so I went to hospitals, and it did sound, but then again, that was early 90s, that people were by and large very short-tempered, treated us in a nasty way, and people are scared because they are vulnerable. Something, is wrong, or someone you're accompanying is sick. So people are vulnerable, and to be treated like that was a shock because I have gone to private doctors too, and the difference was just tremendous.
Mm-hmm.
From the first contact, including sometimes the doctor, not always.
Mm-hmm.
And they couldn't put me down because I asked it all in writing what a doctor said. And he was so wrong that when I asked for that, he had to back up. And from then, everybody else. But
Let's go
it
back.
takes some courage to speak up and tell them, which mostly I could hear the others murmuring in Spanish and being scared. So pretty much what she
Well, and that's of
says.
course something that you can do because you can read and write, right? So that's not the kind of thing that everybody can ask for and have it be useful in the same way. But I wanted to go back to before we move on to the healthcare, I wanted to just talk a little bit more about the housing. I thought it was interesting also that she mentioned that the housing in California or in other parts or for other Latinos, they seem to be more within or bordering Anglo neighborhoods, right? And I did think that was interesting, but then I don't know enough about the demographics. I wondered in California, for example, because there's not a large African American population. So I wondered if that had something to do with it. You know, and she does mention that a little bit in that close to that quote. Doesn't she say that?